The following program was produced by the Theosophical Society in America.
Thank you, Theosophical Society, for inviting me. It's delightful to be here. And I'm so happy that the material I have is exactly the kind of material that would interest you, I know, because I've been buying books from Quest Publications for many years, and I know many of the authors there, and the topics. I just picked up one of the volumes of G.R.S. Mead on the Gnostics that I didn't have, that you've republished. So we're very much in tune, you and I. So I'm very happy to be here with this presentation. So what I want to present to you this afternoon, and a little while with many illustrations, is a work in progress on the theme of the cosmic or universal man. It has different names in different traditions, and I will come to that in a moment. And the main version in the Christian tradition is of the Corpus Christi, or the universal body of Christ. But a few preliminary remarks first. I basically work as a psychotherapist in the Jungian style, but many other styles mixed. And I'm always running into in my practice, as many therapists are, the fact that we as a culture are very, very disembodied. My own culture, the British, is probably one of the worst in the world for that. They live entirely in their heads. I've been waiting for 30 years now for the British to discover the body in psychotherapy. It hasn't happened yet, I'm afraid. We still sit opposite each other in chairs and talk about our problems, if we are British, and keep our lips suitably stiff. So I've run into again and again, despite a good Jungian training, I found I needed to spend some years in Reichian body work to discover my own body fully. And slowly I realized that this is just totally endemic to our and Western culture. And I started looking at the philosophical underpinnings of the so-called body-mind split, commentaries by Jungians like James Hillman, French anthropologist Gilbert Durand, who said the whole of Western civilization is schizomorphic. It does nothing but split from the beginning. I started collecting papers, reading different things, and realized that dimly, when I'd been a student in graduate school of comparative religion, I'd been searching around for a thesis topic, and I came upon the doctrine of the cosmic man in a Sufi form, a text by a man called Al-Jili, called The Perfect Man, which is of the mirror of the macrocosmic man and the microcosmic man in Neoplatonic Sufi thinking. And I thought seriously of doing a doctorate on that at one time. I never did. I put that aside, and my energies went more into pursuing a career as a psychotherapist. I've taught from time to time in colleges. I've kept up my own personal study of mysticism. The doctorate I did do was actually on the mystical teachings of the French mystic Simone Weil, the Jewish mystic. I've also looked into Shakespeare's esoteric, hermetic underpinnings as a Jungian. So this whole area is very familiar to me. But after I started searching more deeply, I came, thanks to Jung, to the Western picture of the cosmic man, buried in a rather difficult book by Jung called Ion, where he writes about the archetype of the anthropos, which is the technical term the early Gnostics used for this cosmic man I'm going to be describing. My sources then broadened. I started reading G.R.S. Mead's collection on the Gnostics, and of course more recent translations and commentaries of the Nag Hammadi Gospels and so on. And what you have here is a kind of a patchwork, work in progress, which draws upon several traditions and one or two major scholarly sources. Mead, Jung, René Guénon's extraordinary work, the Symbolism of the Cross, a paper called The Mysteries of the Serpent by a German Gnostic scholar called Hans Leisergang. And last but not least, very important two books for me, Norman O'Brien, who was writing in the 50s, a book called Life Against Death, a visionary commentary on Freud, and an extension of that, really, Love's Body. I'll come back to these. These are my chief inspirations. If you're a bookish person like me and you like to follow things up, I have left a printed book list of the sources I referred to on the back table. Oh, and the other thing I've been doing in my spare time, which relates to themes that would interest you, is I'm a student of medieval religion, particularly the period of the 12th, 13th century, the troubadours, the Grail legends, and more recently, the Magdalene sites in France. I've been, independently of Dan Brown, been doing my own research into the Magdalene cult, I would call it, in France, and particularly Rennes-le-Château and Les Sameries-la-Mer, and also running into what really is a mystery tradition, which no one's fully explained yet, the Black Madonnas in France. I've been leading tours to that part of France for nearly 30 years, and I'll be doing another one next year. If people are interested, plug, there's a flyer. I have a website called magdalenetours.com where you can get more information. That said, let's come into the theme today. I want to read one or two unusual quotes that have helped me get into understanding or trying to realize how limited my thinking has been about the spirit, the soul, and the body. This was Jung a good 50 years ago in a book called The Spiritual Problem of Modern Man. He wrote, "The body lays equal claim to recognition as the psyche. It exerts the same fascination as the psyche. And if we are caught up in the old idea of an antithesis between mind and matter, this state of affairs must seem an unbearable contradiction. The mysterious truth is that the spirit is the life of the body seen from within, and the body is the outward manifestation of the life of the spirit, the two being really one. Our striving to transcend the present level of consciousness must give the body its due. Recognition of the body cannot tolerate a philosophy that denies it in the name of the spirit." Jacob Boehme. "Man as a whole may be conceived as a planetary spirit, a self-conscious luminous sphere of unimaginable extent, as in fact, at present, the mental sphere of man has no defined limits. It reaches as far as his thoughts can go. Man was created for the purpose of being the image of God. The glory of God was residing in him, and he was penetrated by the light of divine love." And just an apology, linguistically, we don't have a neutral word for, like German Mensch, for human beings. I use man generically for men, women. So forgive me if it sounds sexist. It isn't meant to be. Plotinus. "The soul is many things, is all, is the above and the beneath to the totality of life. And each of us is an intellectual cosmos, linked to the world by what is lowest in us, but also by what is the highest, to the divine intellect, by all that is intellective, we are permanently in that higher realm. But at the fringe of the intellectual, the higher mind, we are fettered to the lower. Henri Corbin, a great scholar of Persian mysticism, said, "What we need is a cosmology of such a kind that the most astounding information of modern science regarding the physical universe remains inferior to it." Modern physicist Max Planck. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds the minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume that behind this force there is the existence of a conscious, intelligent mind. The mind is the matrix of all matter. Jesus said, "Raise the stone, and you shall find me. Cleave the wood, and I am there." Jacob Boehme. Our life is as a fire dampened, or as a fire shut up in stone. Dear children, this fire must blaze and not remain smouldering, smothered. Historical faith is a mouldy matter. It must be set on fire. The soul must break forth from this world into the life of Christ, into Christ's flesh and blood. Then it receives the fuel that makes it blaze. Norman O'Brien. To rise from history to mystery is to experience the resurrection of the body, here, now, as an eternal reality. It is to experience the parousia, the presence of the present, which is the Spirit. To experience the reincarnation of the incarnation, the second coming, which is His coming in us. First, I want to just briefly summarize why Norman O'Brien is so important to me as a thinker. Brown was struck by the side of Freud that looked for the awakening of the pure body of joy and pleasure in the infant, that state of innocence that John described so beautifully in his presentation. Norman O'Brien believed that Freud was a great visionary in the line of William Blake, Boehme, and D.H. Lawrence, and that Freud was in fact a mystic. And this is where I'm going to present a different approach to our esoteric theme than John's, a little bit, not that different. Brown ended up trying to understand the difference between Freud's mysticism, Blake's mysticism, Boehme's mysticism, and that of Evelyn Underhill, Aldous Huxley, and the Western tradition of more spiritual mysticism. And he came up using the metaphor that Nietzsche had coined, the difference between the Apollonian and the Dionysian. And he said, we've heard a lot in the Western tradition of Apollonian mysticism that is all sublimation upwards into the spirit. But we've heard very little, until recently, I think, of the other kind of mysticism that Nietzsche was aware of and also a bit afraid of, Jung too, Dionysian mysticism. The mysticism of the body and the earth and erotic ecstasy, which is also a type of mysticism. And he says we have to seek it in the teachings of the early Gnostics, which is what I'm going to do, in the teachings around the subtle body that you find less in the West but more in India, things like Kundalini Yoga, and also in the buried traditions of alchemy and Kabbalah. So this is the hint I got from Norman O'Brien, and this is the direction I'm going to be looking at. A Dionysian mysticism which allows the full glory of the spirit embodied in nature and in the physical body. Not a dissociated, perhaps that's the wrong term, not a sublimated mysticism that, a little bit like Plotinus' famous phrase, the flight of the alone to the alone, which suggests a movement away from the earth all the time, but a glorification of the earth in all its beauty and divine inner light, as we shall see. The difficulty when we go back, and I'll be drawing a lot on traditional sources from the early Christian era and the Hellenic period, the difficulty when we go back is that our world is so different from theirs, and that we've really lost the sense of the divine, the sense of awe which the ancients had in their mysteries. This is a quote from D.H. Lawrence, who thought long and deeply on this problem in his last work, Apocalypse. He said, "The greatest difference between us and the pagans lies in our different relationship to the cosmos. With us, all is personal. Landscape and the sky, these are to us the delicious background of our personal life, no more." Makes me think of wallpaper on our personal computers. "Even the universe of the scientist is little more than an extension of our personality to us. But to the pagan, landscape and personal background were on the whole indifferent. But the cosmos was a very real thing. A man lived with the cosmos and knew it to be greater than himself. Don't let us imagine that we see the sun as the old civilizations saw it. All we see is a scientific little luminary, dwindled to a ball of blazing gas. In the centuries before Ezekiel and John, the sun was still a magnificent reality. Men drew forth from him strength and splendor and gave him back homage and luster and thanks. But in us, the connection is broken. The responsive centers in us are dead. Our sun is a quite different thing from the cosmic sun of the ancients, so much more trivial. We may see what we call the sun, but we have lost Helios forever, and the great orb of the Chaldeans even more. We have lost the cosmos by coming out of responsive connection with it, and this is our chief tragedy. What is our petty little love of nature, compared to the ancient, magnificent living with the cosmos and being honored by the cosmos? That was Lawrence's lament back in the 30s, shortly before he died. Things are changing today. More and more people are getting in touch with tribal traditions, shamanic practices, working deeply with their bodies in purification practices, sweat lodges, opening the subtle bodies through meditations of various kind. And it is a very special period of history, I think, for this awakening. And this may be part of the contribution, I think, that those of us here interested in the esoteric have to make. For me, it is a linking up of traditions that is very useful and important. One that I've been affected by, and many have, is the reawakening of the Peruvian tradition of a tribe called the Quero Indians, who turn out to be direct descendants of the Incas. The Incas were not destroyed by the Spaniards, as is popularly believed. Many of them just disappeared and went up the mountains. And they were told by their ancients, their wise men, that after 400 years or so, there would be a time when they could return. That time they call the Pachacuti is now. It began in 1987, and they came down from their high, very simple lives up in the higher Andes to begin to teach. And what they teach is exactly what Lawrence says we've lost. So it's very timely. He said that this is from an article by a journalist writer called Joan Parisi Wilcox, who's written on the Quero. The Quero tend not to make the Cartesian distinction between subject and object, between inner and outer, between the signified and the signifier, or between the secular and the sacred. They are able to slip the bounds of the causal and are able quite literally to step outside of linear monochromatic time into non-linear polychromic time. They have not lost the sensory foundation of knowledge, and so they perceive synesthetically, bridging the senses, so that as they are looking at a mountain, they can feel its texture. They perceive totalities, which are by definition non-linear, rather than the fragmented causal reality the West apprehends. The fluidity of their sensory perception is in part a result of their relationship to nature. Their interaction with Mother Earth, to Pachamama, as part of daily life is not only environmental but energetic, part of their being and existence. The average Q'ero alpaca herder, like the shaman, still greets the sun as it rises at dawn and pays his respects to it as it sets at dusk. Q'ero daily life is immersed in the sensory, in the mythic, in the feminine, in Eros. This is what is needed as we begin to reawaken, I believe, to the aspect of the Christ, which is this cosmic man, which is also outside as well as inside. So I want to move to the first slide and sketch some pictures of this. This was a woman a painter in California, who wrote to me after reading my second book, The Goddess Within, and told me she'd had a series of dreams which she'd begun to paint of this being deep under the earth who was disturbing the earth. It was a time when there was beginning of quite a big scare about earthquakes in California. And it shows very clearly how the imagination, our deeper mythic dream consciousness, right brain consciousness, can perceive the earth as the Q'ero perceived it and the ancients. That the earth itself can be felt as a huge cosmic body. The earth herself, I give her the feminine gender obviously, is alive. Recently this kind of idea has come into scientific thinking by the writer James Lovelock. His book Gaia deliberately takes the name of the Greek goddess. But it's an intuition more and more people are having. The planet is alive. Western science, Western material science, not the advanced thinking of the physicists, but the technological science that we live with that pretty much is responsible for how we live in our civilization, still treats the world as a thing, as an object, something to be used, something to be manipulated, to be mined, to be flooded, to be dammed, to be devastated by burning crops. Whole forests can be removed for our so we can have comfortable, fashionable furniture, and so on. The devastation of this earth is due to a scientific attitude that does not treat the earth as alive, but simply as an object of our use. The fear of paganism and the rise of Puritanism, the over-exaggeration of asceticism, the desert fathers who run from the horrors of the late Roman world into the desert to purify themselves in extreme degrees, is a movement away from the body and away from the earth. These are extreme solutions, and there are more moderate forms of asceticism, of course. But this tendency to reject the body and to move away from the earth. There's a slide I don't have with me of the Simon of the desert, Simon called Stylites, because in trying to get away from the temptations of the flesh, which were all around in the Roman world, Simon found himself somewhere out in the desert, a pillar from an old ruined temple that was standing alone and had a nice convenient flat top on it. And some friends got him a ladder and he climbed up there and he felt nicely removed from the sinfulness of the world of that time. And his friends would let him haul up food and so on. He stayed there for the rest of his days. But the slide I don't have, unfortunately, shows a huge serpent curling around the pillar trying to get at him. You don't get away from the Earth Mother that easily, it seems, or the sinfulness of the world. Nevertheless, the early church tried and stamped upon, certainly Western teaching, less so in the Orthodox tradition, a deep distrust of the body, of Eros, and particularly a deep distrust of the dark side of the Great Mother, of Eve. And this is what we're left with, alas. The doctrine that the earth, the cosmos, is one enormous body, is found in various places. This is an Indian example where the cosmic Lord Prajapati, or in another form Purusha, I'm not sure which one this is, but he contains within him all levels, all forms of the cosmos in his cosmic body. We can see mountains, we can see people, cities, everything. This is a common theme in Indian religion. Vishnu is shown this way, Krishna, and so on. The idea of a body, a huge cosmic body holding the earth together, is also found in the Norse Eddas. There is a cosmic giant called Ymir. We find it in Persia, in the god king Gaiamat, who is a giant who is murdered, and his body is scattered and becomes the metals of the earth. This is a theme we'll be coming back to. The cosmic giant is frequently scattered through the earth. And this is the source of the myths about Osiris, about Dionysus. Osiris, as we know, is killed by his brother, and his body parts are scattered to all parts of the universe, only later to be gathered by Isis, his mother. Dionysus, in one of the cults of Dionysus, Zagreus, is sacrificed and his body torn apart and eaten. And these practices, these myths, obviously have parallels in early Christianity, where Christ himself is sacrificed and, in symbolic form at least, is eaten. What we're looking at in the picture of cosmic man, and I don't have slides of all these versions. Oh, the other one would be Odin, the Norse god who is crucified on a tree, which becomes the tree of the world tree. We have these gods whose bodies not only represent the total cosmos and hold it together, the spiritual essence, as it were, but also the body is in some sense scattered and distributed throughout the earth. This is a theme that comes up in the Gnostic teachings, where the Logos, I'll be coming to the Logos as the divine principle in all things, the Logos is scattered through the universe as 1,000 million sparks of light, sometimes called the scintillae. That was the word the alchemists used. The Greeks used the term the Logos spermatikos. 1 billion seeds of light are scattered through the universe, and these are part of the cosmic body of the universal man. So here we're looking in these images. Jesus too becomes eventually, his body is given for the regeneration of mankind. But in the background there is the old image that his body is given and distributed and eaten for the regeneration of the cosmos. And eventually, slowly, the doctrine of the Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, who is in everything and who feeds the universe, develops. I'm not looking here, our perspective, because it's a cosmic perspective, I'm not looking at the individual mystical teachings that have been developed around Christ's life and death, not a personal model. Here we're looking more at the cosmic, the universal model of the figure of this human figure that is part of the mystery of the death and rebirth, not just of the individual, but of the whole cosmos. And other images from different traditions find their way into Christianity, such as the tree of life here. As we've said, Odin is sacrificed on a tree, and the world tree will recur in our themes. The cross becomes the tree of life and death. And in Jungian researchers have always compared the tree to the Great Mother, the mother of life and death. And so here, appropriately, it is coming out of the chest of the Virgin Mary as she sleeps. Unfortunately, we are stuck with the word man in English. The Greek word anthropos, which is used by the Gnostics as a technical term, is much more useful because we don't have associations. But the anthropos, the cosmic man, we'll get more images in a minute, the cosmic man is always androgynous. This is particularly clear with the Kabbalistic version, the Adam Kadmon, the man out of whom the universe is created from the Ein Sof, the One. The cosmic man not only is the universe, he creates the universe. He is the power, the anthropos is the power that moves through all living things. How it moves through all living things, whence it originates, how it moves from the spiritual into the material is the mystery that I'm going to try to amplify, to use the Jungian term, by different images. One of the images, as well as the millions of sparks of light of the cosmic body scattered through the universe, is that from any point in the universe, from any point within a physical object, a body, a cell, an atom, the universe is being created. The idea of this point, I'll come back to this in the Kabbalistic vision in just a little while. But in order to show these things, the early Christian and Hellenic mind and the Gnostic mind used images rather than scientific or abstract concepts. There are some abstract, you actually find more abstract speculations of this kind in the Indian Vedantic tradition. But here the image is supreme. Images are symbols. I use the word symbol in the sense of symbolon, which in Greek means sounding together, as we did with the two bells just a little while ago. Symbolon is that which sounds or resonates the higher and the lower. A symbol connects the lower and the higher worlds. So whilst we see a physical image, and it's clearly derived from the physical world, it resonates in the subtle or higher worlds. Jung said, a throwaway Gnostic remark of his in Symbols of Transformation, he says, think literally and you will become flesh. Think symbolically and you will become spirit. The symbol is the connector. So here the image here is the point out of which radiates a world. The central point of the compass is connected at the higher point of ultimate spirit, the cosmic man, radiates out and creates a world. It describes a world. By the way, as an aside, Christopher and I and Richard have a very dear friend called Alice Howell, who loves to play with words in spiritual teaching. And she reminds us that the opposite of symbolon, which means sounding together or resonating the higher and the lower, is diabolon. Diabolon is that which separates. It doesn't sound together. And of course, from diabolon, we get the word devil. Someone once wrote, evil is that which makes for separateness. And in the Sufi tradition, the satanic is simply a one-level vision, only accepting this world as real. Interestingly, university departments are based on the diabolic principle of keeping all disciplines separate. If you want to research something like near-death experience in a university, you can either do it in the science department and look at the brain, or you can do it in the religion department and look at what the Tibetans have to say, but you're not allowed to put the two parts of the research together. I learnt this watching a BBC film not long ago on near-death experience, which had a beautiful demonstration of what happened on the operating table, and I was waiting for someone to interview Sogyal Rinpoche or Tibetan Buddhist on what happens to the soul after it leaves the body. But no, the BBC have strict rules that you don't have religious experts in scientific programs and you don't have science experts in religious programs. That is technically Diabolos. However, we're going to go the other way of Symbolos. Here is a medieval image in the British Museum of the Christ as world, clearly holding his whole body, a cosmos, and transcending it at the same time. We'll come to other images of this in just a moment. This image of the universal man that I'm going to be looking at has many names and many designations and descriptions. I've mentioned Anthropos, Adam Kadmon in the Kabbalah, in the Jewish tradition. In the early Gnostic and early Christian tradition, he becomes the Logos, the divine word emanating from all beings. I'll come back to that. In the Sufi tradition, the universal man is sometimes called the man of light. We'll be looking at that too. He's also called by the Sufis the perfect man, al-insan al-kamil. And of course, in the more mainstream Christian tradition, is the Corpus Christi. This is essentially a Gnostic and esoteric mystery of how the cosmic body of the universal man binds all levels of creation. Not just the creation upon the earth, but the connection of the higher levels of the spirit. It is both a vertical symbol and a horizontal symbol. And of course, that which that joins the vertical and the horizontal is none other than the cross. Here is another image, this time from medieval alchemy, of Jesus as the Anthropos, holding within him the four elements of the earth. The earth is within his body, and he unites all the opposites within him. Jung has written on this theme, and also the parallel symbolism of Mercurius, who is also another version of the cosmic man. Here you see the top circle, the solar world, and beneath the lunar world, which are both spiritual and, of course, physical. This is Blake's imaginative recreation of the creation of Adam. And I use it, it's not perfect as an image of what I want to describe, but it has one element we'll be coming back to, the serpent, which is clearly part of the creative process when Yahweh creates Adam. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the image, which, as I say, I don't have anything to correspond to this, I will simply read to you how Gershom Scholem describes the creation of being. He says, in the midst of the Ein Sof, the One, into which emanated a ray of life, there came a space with 10 Sephirot. The Ein Sof performs an act of divine contraction and completes this empty vacuum into which a ray of light appears and 7 levels of being are created. This light is held in the form of a vertical column which hold all the spheres together. The vacuum, called a Tzimtzum, is not fixed but is dynamic. The act of contraction and expansion in the creation of the many-sphered universe is constant. There is a double rhythm, says Scholem, the recurring feature of every stage in the universal process. Into this spherical space, arranged in concentric circles and in a unilinear form, which is there appears the form of the Adam Kadmon, the primordial man that precedes all other primordials. In another version of this theme, in the Corpus Hermeticum, the text, the Poimandres, says, All Father Mind, Nous, being light and life, brings forth Anthropos co-equal to himself. G.R.S. Mead sums it up by saying, This man or Anthropos is the spiritual prototype of humanity and every individual man and woman. It's a technical term that we find in many systems. In the commentary on the Sufi text, man, in virtue of his essence, is the cosmic thought, the logos assuming flesh and connecting absolute being with this world of nature. The primal man sinking into matter, working with it as a creative principle, but at the same time longing for deliverance, wishing to find his way back to the source. In a sense, then, the cosmic man, the Adam Kadmon, the Anthropos, is trapped in matter. This is a common Gnostic theme, and the longing to return to the light finds its expression in many mysticisms. Here is a rather prosaic image of Adam Kadmon with the Sephirot associated with different levels of the cosmic body. This theme of the cosmic body mirroring the different levels of the cosmos finds its way through the Hermetic teachings to the Renaissance with the resurrection of Hermetic teaching by Cosimo. This is from Roberto Flood's famous illustrated book, and he gives us the words derived originally from Plato of the macrocosmos and man, the microcosmos. That the different levels of the cosmic body, today we would say the different chakras, as we've learnt more from India, are mirrored exactly at the different planetary spheres. And one of the big themes when we look at the dynamic of this process is that that longing to return means an ascent through the different spheres of the cosmic hierarchy, as well as a purification of the inner spheres of the human subtle body, the two processes mirroring each other. In alchemy, this is very clearly shown by the fact that the metals corresponds to planets, so that Mars corresponds to the metal iron, and Venus corresponds to copper, and that in alchemy these metals in the human body correspond to qualities that have to be purified and mixed with others in order for the elements that are buried or lost in the subtle body to be purified and raised to another level. Here is a medieval image of the ascent through the spheres that the soul is supposed to make after death, or we could say in a state of deep meditation, and an opening to the cosmic Christ, who is the ruler of the whole process. This doctrine found its way through various mystics and teachers, even though the tendency of the official church more and more suppressed the mysticism, the Dionysian mysticism, Brown calls it, of the body. And one of the greatest of these, of course, is Hildegard of Bingen, who shows very clearly how the cosmic man here is Jesus, and notice he's quite androgynous. It's not clear, there's no genitals, whether this is just modesty on the part of Hildegard, or it may be a real awareness that the cosmic man-woman is androgynous. And the greater, the father nous, the father out of whom the anthropos is created, is clearly shown here on the outside. Now I'm going to use this image to take us into a beautiful description of the unity of the cosmic man and how he unites in himself both the earthly and the spiritual, and the pathway between the two of the different levels of the soul. And I'm going to quote a well-known author who is present with us, the translation of Christopher Bamford of Scotus Eriugena's The Voice of the Eagle. Imposing on Hildegard this scheme, we have the idea that man, as the mirror of the cosmos, or the human being, the anthropos as mirror of the cosmos, holds together, we hold together in our beings all levels of the cosmos. We are the microcosm, we are the miniature mirror of all these levels. And John Scotus Eriugena, in his homily on the Gospel of St. John, the prologue to the Gospel of St. John, puts it very beautifully. The first of these worlds is filled uniquely with the invisible and spiritual substances of the angelic hierarchies. Whoever enters into it possesses full participation of the true light. The second world, down here, the bottom, is directly counter to the first, for it is constituted wholly of visible and bodily natures. And yet, however low a position in the universe this world might possess, the Word was nevertheless in it. The Logos is everywhere in it. And it is made by the Word, by the Logos. Thus, it is the first stage for those wishing to ascend to the cognition of the truth by sensible means. For the species of visible things draws the thinking soul towards the cognition of things invisible. The third world, the middle world, and in many cosmologies we have this middle world. The third world is that which, like a mediating principle, unites in itself the upper spiritual world and the lower bodily world, making of these two one. By this world, humanity alone is meant, in whom all creatures are joined as one. For the human being consists of a body and a soul, binding together the body of this world and the soul of the other world. The human being, humanity, creates a single cosmos. For the body possesses all bodily nature, and the soul all spiritual nature. And these living and these fitting together into a single harmony make up the cosmic world of the human being. That is why man, in Greek, is called all. Anthropos also has the meaning of all, apparently. For all creatures are in humanity, as if melted down in a crucible. Now, the picture that Hildegard and Scotus Eriugena give us are very pure and beautiful and simple. But if we stay a little longer with the early Christian period and the Hellenic period of the mystery schools and Gnosticism, we find that the picture of the cosmic man gets even more complex and interesting. And we just saw in the slide of Blake's image of the creation of Adam Kadmon, a serpent wrapped around his body. And I want to take you into a little known aspect of Christian Gnosticism, the cult of the serpent. I know Richard will be pleased because we get into serpent handling here, which he couldn't get into in his lecture. Believe it or not, the early Christians, one particular sect, or possibly two, were serpent worshippers. And they saw the serpent as Jesus, as the cosmic Lord. And this is evidenced here by a Roman coin collected by, I think, the scholar Goodenough, which shows that Christ on the cross is both a human and a serpent. This is very strange to us, and it's certainly beyond most of our modern thinking. The person who has given us most information on the cult of the serpent is the early church father Hippolytus, Bishop Hippolytus of Rome, who spent his time collecting as many descriptions of Gnostic teachings and practice as he could. He's a very useful writer in that we have information about sects that we would know nothing about had he not gone poking around wanting to know what they practiced. And he describes two sects. He describes one sect which he calls the Ophites. Ophos in Greek means serpent, and they are the worshippers of the serpent. Here is the serpent on the cross again, and here they are doing their weird and, to many minds, rather lewd practices of kissing the serpent. Well, in some other texts it is described that in certain pagan temples and in the Ophite temples they kept serpents in a chest, in a basket. And when they were ready to perform their version of the Eucharist, or the particular ritual that they performed, the serpents were allowed out, and they put cakes and food on the altar close to the sacrificial wine and bread that they were using, and they asked for the blessing of the serpent, that the serpent was invited to crawl over and touch the sacred objects that were later to be ingested. The serpent was clearly holy to these people. And the contact with the serpent, clearly, as you see, whether this is actually a contemporary drawing of what someone saw or it is an imagined, clearly physical contact with the serpent was part of this cult. Whether like snake handling in the Deep South today or recently, it put people into trance. What exactly went on, we really don't know. But we do know there are several accounts of this. The other sect that, the other name for this sect is the Nassim. Nasis in Hebrew means serpent, and they were called the serpent worshippers. Some scholars aren't quite sure whether they're two separate sects or the same sect, but either way, a serpent was involved. But the most mysterious thing of all is this serpent climbing up the cross. We saw it in the coin, and there was a cult of the crucified serpent who is Christ. Now this is very strange. Hippolytus says that they worshipped Jesus as the serpent because the serpent is that which moves eternally from the lower to the higher. He put it this way: midway between the father and mother, the Son, the Logos, has his place. He is the serpent who moves eternally to the Father. No one can be saved and rise up without the Son, who is the serpent. What exactly was going on here? As I've said, we do know that serpents had been kept in chests, various cults. I think I have an image from, yes, the cult of Isis used serpents, and here's one of the chests. Clearly it was sacred in pagan religions, and in many images we could go into that Jungians and others have collected. In the worship of the Great Mother, the serpent is extremely important. There's a famous image of a priestess, or possibly a goddess, holding a serpent in each hand from Crete, a very well-known image from Knossos. So the serpent was important in the mother religions, and has a lot to do, clearly, with the energy of the earth, the sacred, the divine energy of spirit that flows through the earth. With the rejection of the mother images by the mother goddesses by the Christian religion, the serpent becomes increasingly demonized. But in these images that come from the serpent worship, it was still regarded as holy. Possibly the Nassines, or the Ophites, the serpent worshippers, took their cue from a curious phrase, a sentence in St. John's Gospel, where he says, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man also be lifted up." This is the serpent that is raised. Or possibly that was a Gnostic text that got left in by mistake in St. John. It is never really elaborated. Some of you, Christopher, with his knowledge, might know of some commentary on that text I don't know of. But the point is that clearly this serpent is a part of the divine movement from the lower to the higher. This is also mirrored in a rather obscure passage in the first book of the corpus, so-called Corpus Hermeticum, the Poimandres, where Poimandres, the divine teacher, in trying to explicate the whole dynamic of creation, turns himself into a vision of gloomy darkness. And the text says, and he descends, fearful and gloomy, coiling sinuously so that he looks like a serpent. And then the darkness changes into something of a watery nature, indescribably agitated, smoking like a fire, and it produces an unspeakable wailing roar. But from the light, a holy word, a logos, mounts upon the watery nature, and untempered fire leapt up from the watery depths to the height above. Somehow a serpentine energy goes deep into the watery depths and transforms itself into fire. This is all you get in this short passage, nothing more. But what it is here looking at is the idea of a cosmic serpent that works with all levels of material reality and raises them up. It's this motif of raising we'll be coming back to, that the serpent brings with it. We see there are it's a very complex image. There are different aspects to the serpent we're going to see. This serpent that is connected with water and connected with the earth has been known from very, very ancient times. I think it's Greek word, the Ouroboros is often pictured as this serpent biting its tail that in some way surrounds and encircles everything. Here is if you look carefully, a very, very ancient, this is Mesopotamia. This is at least 5,000 years old, apparently. The serpent encloses the world. Maybe, that's part of it. But also this image of the serpent biting its tail as though it's consuming itself. Many scholars and commentators have suggested that this is a picture of the dynamic of creation, that the serpentine energy is the very life force, the movement of creation itself, that nature consumes nature in the cyclical process of renewal. In the Indian tradition, in the earliest Vedas, in fact earlier than the Vedas, in the earliest tradition, there are two main gods, Agni, the god of fire, and Soma, substance, material. Substance is offered, Soma is offered to Agni to be consumed. This is the constant rite of the Vedas that you read in the early texts. And this, Alan Danielou suggests, is the whole process of creation. There has to be sacrifice, something has to be devoured, consumed, in order that creation may go forward. This is what the sort of energetic psychology of sacrifice is about, and this is symbolized here by the serpent eating itself. It's all natural process is cyclical, dying and being reborn. But in a sense, nature, in fact, devours herself in order that she may recreate. So this is part of the meaning of the serpent, not the whole of it. And this finds its way into these early Gnostic Hellenic texts. Now we come to the most extraordinary image that is the starting point for Hans Leisergang's really wonderful compendium of Gnosticism called The Mysteries of the Serpent, in the text called the Eriugena books. This was a bowl that was found, it turned up at some auction in the Mediterranean about 60, 70 years ago, and it had a few fragments in Greek on the side that seemed to be hymns to possibly belonging to one of the mystery schools. They weren't certain. And it took many years to decipher and figure out what it was about. What you have here is a winged serpent in the middle of a kind of a sunburst. and 16 initiates, presumably initiates, naked, making various signs. No one has ever managed to decipher the semaphore that they're using here. I can't comment on that. But what Leisegang and other scholars finally put together, that these are the initiates who are worshipping the risen serpent, the serpent who has risen up the axis mundi of, in the Christian version of the cross, the Nicene version, and has united with the solar fire. This is clearly the solar fire. And the transcendent form of the serpent is shown that he has wings. In alchemy, you find this motif of the two serpents, the serpent without wings, that is the lower serpent, and the serpent with wings that has risen up, the sublimated, or the higher version. Possibly, guessing, these represent initiates who have been reborn. Nakedness usually suggests rebirth of some kind. As a baby, you are reborn naked. And they have witnessed the highest theophany, the highest manifestation of the serpent god, who is also Anthropos, who is also, in this sect, Leisegang speculates, is Jesus. This is the serpent form of Jesus, resurrected, if you like. Now, no longer trapped in matter, no longer part of just the earth cycle on the material, but sublimated, risen up, and transformed and become the body of light, united with the sun. As you see, these images are extremely complex, and we have to sort of compare one to another. This Jungians call this amplification, to get a feeling for what might be going on. I've thrown this, it's not a very good image, this, but this is Ezekiel's vision of the chariot of fire on which the divine, in the form of a man, sits upon a throne. This is part of a mystical tradition called the Macabre, or the throne mysticism. But in order to reach the divine man, the initiate or consciousness has to pass through seven spheres, or 7 heavenly palaces, in order that the luminous body of God in the shape of a man can be seen. And this, Leisegang and others speculated, is the process that the initiates have to go through. That the passing through the various spheres, as we saw in the earlier pictures from Hermetic tradition, is fundamental to the movement of the serpent that becomes the light, becomes part of the solar fire. The Orphic tradition believed that the universe was created out of an egg, and that the cosmic serpent surrounding the egg, who is given various names, sometimes actually called Kronos, because the serpent, as we'll see, has a lot to do with time and the cycles of the universe, not just physical movement, but the movement of time. The cosmic serpent, according to one of the Orphic legends, hatches the great egg out of which creation comes. And this is imaged in the Mithraic tradition, which also sees the god Mithras, another Anthropos, another cosmic lord, born out of the splitting of the cosmic egg. When the cosmic egg breaks apart, out comes Mithras with a sword in one hand and a torch in the other hand. Now you'll notice around the side we have astrological motifs, which suggests that the Anthropos, whether he's called Mithras, whether he's called Phanes, whether he's called Jesus, is a god of time. One of his names is in fact Ion, the god of the eons. He is a god of cosmic cycles, and that Ouroboric picture of the serpent biting its tail is of course a representative of the complete cycle, which ends in some kind of transformation or destruction. In many of the ancient traditions, there are legends or teachings about the rotation of the cycles of the ages from the gold to the silver to the bronze to the iron. This would be the Hindu picture. We are in the fourth cycle of iron, the Kali Yuga currently, in which the universe will somehow change in some way. All of these themes come together in one of the most complex, and I think one of the most beautiful of the mystery school images. This is the cosmic man, thought to be in one part of the Orphic tradition again. And we see pretty much all of the themes brought together here. Here are the two parts of the egg. Here is the cosmic fire that is being cooked by the great serpent. And now the serpent is no longer surrounding the egg, it's surrounding the cosmic man himself. And here's the head coming over the top. So we could speculate that the group of Mystai, they're called, the initiates standing naked around the cosmic fire, have symbolically ascended and are somewhere up here in the picture of sublimation or the journey of the soul towards the light. But there's so much going on in this picture that, you know, Jocelyn Godwin says it's the most condensed of all the pictures of the mystery schools we have. The sun is symbolized here by a lion's head. We'll come back to that. He's put in the solar plexus in this particular picture. Here's other. This is probably a Vajra, a thunderbolt. This figure assimilates aspects of Zeus, aspects of the lords of thunder, Jupiter. The staff is very important. It links him to Hermes, Mercurius, who of course has the staff with serpents around it. And also Hippolytus tells us that this figure, the cosmic man, the anthropos, is called Aipolos. He is the one who rotates around the pole. Now there seems to be a reference to the poles of the different levels of the planetary spheres. It may also be a reference to the precession of the equinoxes. And certainly, once again, here is the cycle of the ages, the ion. So the cosmic man is the god of time, of beginnings and endings, very, very clearly. And we'll see some other versions. He is winged because he transcends and rises above all. I want to read you Lysergang's summary of this very complex figure and his various names. An Orphic hymn invokes the divine cosmic power as the sun which rules the infinite cosmic space over the heaven of the fixed stars. This divine cosmic power is the originator of the cosmos, the motion of the heavens. He is called variously Zeus, Dionysus, and Helios at once. He recalls the primordial age before the birth of the cosmos, when heaven and earth were not separated from each other, when Kronos in the form of a great serpent bore the cosmic egg, which contained the whole cosmos, and with it the god Phanes, otherwise known as Mithras, who, when the world was completed, soared above it with his wings and took his place as Zeus at the summit of heaven, where, as Helios, he illuminated the world, and as Dionysus and Pan maintained the rotation of the starry sphere. Now, you may not have noticed that this figure has cloven feet, has goat's feet. So he unites, he's got his feet in the fiery half egg here, he unites the animal and the spiritual worlds, and in that sense he is related to Pan. The syncretism, the synthesis, whatever word you want to use, the mixing of the traditions is very complex. You see, what they're doing, the mysteries were not taught as long verbal discourses. They were shown with symbolic acts, and these images were attempts to fix in one form a highly complex number of activities and dynamics. So as Dionysus and Pan, this figure the Phanes, maintains the rotation of the starry world. He is the life of the world, its ion. He is the lifespan, the vital force of the world. He will endure as long as the ion himself. He is the great cosmic year, as in the Mahayuga in India, which he orders into years, seasons, months, and days by the movement of the stars that take place in him and through him. I'm going to let this sort of be the last major image, and I'm just going to hint at some of the other parts of the complex. Here, the ion is shown with the head of a lion. You can still see his serpent here. This is at the frontispiece of Jung's book on the which talks a lot about the anthropos, ion. The phallic aspect of the pole is emphasized in many of the mystery schools. And here is an alchemical image. The phallus is that which moves upwards. It is again the vertical movement, so it's an apt symbol of the serpentine energy wanting to reconnect to heaven. Very briefly, I don't have time to go into this, I wanted to talk about the symbolism of Logos. We're running out of time. In the early church, the cross had more than one meaning. It wasn't just the symbol of Christ's death, but it is also the symbol of the union of the two planes, the lower and the higher planes. And that the unifying principle, here shown by the mudra of the raised fingers, is the Logos as that which emanates from the divine and informs all beings. Been many studies, of course, of the principle of the Logos, but like the Anthropos, like Jesus, the Logos as cosmic Lord is also the beginning and end, is also the sun and the moon. René Guénon calls the horizontal aspect of the cross the amplitude, the spreading out of the life force, the creative life force that runs through all things, here captured in a beautiful Celtic manuscript, that Christ is also in his death, like Osiris, like Dionysus, part of the expansion, the seeding of the life force, the blood, the zoos of the universe. At the same time, he is also the vertical dimension. So in medieval iconography, this is Conques in southern France, another place on our tours, this magnificent tympanum of, some have interpreted this as Christ as the judge, and the elect over here certainly, and the damned on the left. But it is also the two hands holding together the higher and the lower world. What the man of light, the cosmic man who lives in all of us, has to teach us is that we are one with the universe. As the heavenly prototype hidden in matter, he is the constantly resurrected man of light, who is the serpent of the life force, both the higher and the lower, who, like the Kundalini energy, rises up the central axis of the cross and the central axis of our being, and expands with arms open to all the cosmos with his life-giving energy. The man of light has been lost, just as we have lost contact with our purer, subtle bodies, but he's nevertheless, like the pearl of great price, within us. The man of light wears the robe of glory once given to us by the All-Father, Nous, the universal mind, lost and forgotten like the pearl. The man of light lies scattered through the universe, his body, his flesh, and awakens in us and awakens to us as we awaken to him. It is not an act of resurrection in the past, as Norman O'Brien says, but the resurrection, the reincarnation of the incarnation here, now, in our personal lives as well as in history. Just a few more images of the awakening of the subtle body in its astral form. A modern image from Manly Hall's famous book, Secret Teaching of All the Ages. the opening to the light. An image of Mercurius with his serpents, uniting all the opposites here, uniting the different planetary and metallic energies into the universal man. And finally, Blake's wonderful Glad Day, the divine image, which I will close with. To mercy, pity, peace, and love, all pray in their distress, and to these virtues of delight return their thankfulness. For mercy, pity, peace, and love is God, our Father dear, and mercy, pity, peace, and love is man, his child and care. For mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine, and peace the human dress. Then every man in every clime that prays in his distress, prays to the human form divine, love, mercy, pity, peace. And all must love the human form, in heathen, Turk, or Jew. Where mercy, love, and pity dwell, there God is dwelling too. Thank you very much.